Good evening. It is 6:07. We are here at Kingston City Hall uh, and streaming via YouTube. Um, and it is Monday, June 12th, and this is the City of Kingston Rent Guidelines Board. I am Chair Noah Kipley-Ogman, and I'm calling this meeting to order. We'll start with a roll call. Diana Lopez-Martinez is not able to make it. Mie Nuye.
Here.
Mike Brown is not present. Junior Tampone is running late. Tara Perry.
Here.
Michael Tierney. Here. Carol Soto.
Here.
And Arlene Puentes.
Here.
Here. Thank you. We are here tonight because the Emergency Tenant Protection Act, Section 4, Paragraph B, requires the duly established Rent Guidelines Board to establish annual guidelines for rent adjustments. The decision from the Supreme Court of Ulster County to vacate this board's guidelines for the 2022 to 2023 period is in effect pending appeal and does not change the board's statutory obligation to set guideline rates of rent adjustment for housing accommodations within its jurisdiction subject to the Emergency Tenant Protection Act of 1974 for leases commencing between October 1st, 2023 and September 30th, 2024. As required by the statute and by longstanding practice, the board will consider, among other things, the economic conditions of the residential real estate industry, relevant data from the current and projected cost of living indices, and such other data as may be made available to it. We do that over the course of a meeting tonight, a public hearing at 1 p.m. on Saturday at the Kingston Library, and a final meeting at 6 p.m. next Wednesday here in City Hall. Members of the public are welcome to attend all three meetings, but will only be welcome to testify at the public hearing on Saturday. No public testimony will be accepted either at today's meeting or at next Wednesday. On Saturday, we will limit speakers to 3 minutes for members of the public and 5 minutes for people representing organizations, and we will end public testimony at 4 p.m. If members of the public have more to say than can be conveyed in that limited time or cannot attend on Saturday, you are encouraged to send your comments to this board by email to kingstonrgb@hcr.ny.gov by Saturday. Next Wednesday, this board will convene again here at 6 p.m. for a meeting to set guideline rates of rent adjustments for housing accommodations within its jurisdiction. I will ask the owner representatives and tenant representatives to propose guidelines for the board's consideration and discussion. We will then entertain motions from any member of the board. Before turning to a presentation from our colleagues at DHCR, are there any other items of business we should discuss or flag?
I'm getting
Michael.
text that the live stream isn't up yet, so I don't think we should proceed until it does.
Was this received in the past 2 minutes?
In the last 15 seconds.
I do see the live stream on the city's YouTube channel.
All right, right on.
I have a
Arlene.
question. The data that we are supposed to, the data that you spoke about in your presentation, are we getting all of that today, or is that something that's going to be emailed to us?
I expect that DHCR will answer that in the course of their presentation. Without further ado, I'd like to invite our colleagues from DHCR to present the information and reports that they've prepared.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I am Woody Pascal, the Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Oh, this chair's low. Okay, I'm gonna start again. I am Woody Pascal, the Deputy Commissioner at the Office of Rent Administration. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I want to thank you again for all of your service. On the, I guess, Zoom, we have Assistant Commissioner Guy Alba, who is in charge of our research and analysis, and he will go over some data points with you. And he will also talk about the ETPA survey that's being done. Guy?
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Guy Alba. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for the Office of Rent Administration at the Division of Housing and Community Renewal, Homes and Community Renewal. I will try to present you first for a little matrix and data. So you will give a little scope of the city of Kingston and some of your population and your housing units, and give you a little bit of a roundabout. I hope I can I have the host I hope I have the ability to share with you my screen. Let me see if Stajik, are you there to allow
Yeah,
the sharing of the screen?
you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, give me a second. Okay, let me know if you guys can see it.
We can see it, but I would appreciate it if you could speak a little bit more slowly.
Sure,
The acoustics in this room are an adventure.
I will try my best, absolutely. This presentation will give you a little bit of information about some of the building that submitted their initial registration to HCR. As you know, the total population that we were looking at is about 23, almost 24,000, which was about 2% higher than 2017. However, the number of the available housing units in the city of Kingston actually was down by about 1% during that time period, and I will show you that in the data. Most of the interesting data that you will notice is some of the members of the population and your constituents. Some of them are considered burdened, which is rent burden, which is about 30% of their gross income goes to rent, and some of them are extremely rent burdened, and that's considered 50% of their gross income that is being used for rent, which is a slight uptick. I'm aware that we've been coming in and out of matters with COVID, but it's just a point that I would like to make that you're aware of. Median gross rent again was by the American Community Survey, the ACS, and the was about 1,100, 1,160, and the overall household income, which is a nice increase, you'll see on the graph, was about 58, look about, if you want to round about $59,000, $60,000. That's the median for the household income in this population. I'm going to skip into the chart, and this is the matrix that we are going to provide you. I believe, I don't know the name of the member that asked the question, but we will provide you with this information. This is the total population given to you over a period of about 6 years. It's a 5-year change, but it's over a period of 6 years, and you'll see the total population, the total housing units in the city of Kingston, owner-occupied, renter-occupied units, renter-occupied housing units, and then we were looking at different sections of the renter-occupied unit. And what I mean by that is some units or buildings have anywhere from 1 to 4 units, 5 to 9 units, and anywhere from 10 units and above. And we broke it down. You'll notice that there's a loss in the population for housing units 5 to 9, meaning buildings that have 5 to 9 units in them. There's a loss from 2016 to 2021. It's substantial, and you can see it. It's approximately 30% loss, about almost a third. What I also looked at, that the numbers that were, would stick out, I think I mentioned it a few seconds ago, was the rent burdened households. Rent burdened households, if you look at the general population, are people who make up approximately 30% of their income, and they use that towards rent. And then there's the extremely rent burdened household. There is a decrease in the extremely rent burdened household, and there is a decrease over the years from 2016 to 2021. And you can see that if you go down, you'll see the median income has progressively gone up from 2016 being at about 43,500 to about 58,800 in 2021. The vacancy, we've seen a vacancy units or total vacant units within this population that has diminished by about 9%. And the total vacant units available for rent as we was about 22%. Medium household value, that's probably, you know, the city of Kingston better than I, but we're looking at approximately $198,000, about $200,000 in 2021, comparatively to $167,000 in 2016. I'm going to stop right here and take some questions if anyone has.
I do have a request, Guy. Could you put your slide deck on presentation view?
It's not on presentation view, I'm sorry.
It's not.
It's funny, it's on mine. Okay, let me see, hold on. One second, I'm sorry.
If you click on that button that says from current slide, that should do it.
Okay, I'm sorry, yes.
Here we go.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Is there a benchmark of what's an appropriate rate of rent burdened households and extremely rent burdened households in a community? Like what is too many rent burdened households, and what is, I mean, I hesitate to ask like what is too few rent burdened households, but that's betraying my innocence of the field. What's a good benchmark for those figures?
That depends. Every city, every municipality determines it differently. So that would be hard for me as an economist to determine it for, you know, Kingston. What is considered a rent or an extremely rent, or at least the fine line of what is considered a extremely and rent burdened households. That is a question that, you know, I may have to, you know, search a little bit and go a little bit more into the history of Kingston in order to give you the answer. So allow me to, let me just jot this down and see if I can give you this answer in a day or two.
I appreciate that. Comparative examples would be helpful, right? Like what are similar communities? What are the parallel levels of rent burden in similar communities?
So again, it's established by the Census Bureau. So the Census Bureau determines what is considered a rent burden at 30% and what is considered extremely rent burdened at 50%. So the actual, you know, the federal government, the Census Bureau determines what the matrix will be as far as 30%, 50%. You know, we basically analyze the data and give you the data of what Kingston is.
I just want to say for the record that it's 6:22 and Junior Tampone has joined us. Thank you, Junior. I'm sorry. Everything was running late.
Thank you. Sorry for being late.
I had a question. Is the gross rent for a one bedroom, or is it just a is that across all rental units?
This is the median, so
The
median
median.
is, yeah, that's the median across the household units that you see on the chart from 1 to 4 units, all the way up to 10 and over.
Okay, of any size.
That's correct.
Okay.
And we will forward you these matrix, so you will have that. I believe someone asked again the question earlier, and I believe we will share this information with you via email. I believe Woody would be able to inform you when it would be sent out.
I noticed on your first slide that you named that there are 30 buildings that have submitted initial registrations in 2022 of the population of, I believe it was 64 buildings initially identified as subject to ETPA regulation. Remind me, is it a legal requirement for building owners to register their buildings?
It is a requirement for them to register their building every single year if you are in the ETPA system.
And from this report, it looks like less than half of buildings are complying with that legal requirement.
That's correct.
Was that legal requirement to register affected in any way by the litigation brought against this board and other agencies by the Hudson Valley Property Owners Association at all? And or was that legal requirement affected at all by the decision of the Supreme Court of Ulster County?
I will actually yield this question to the legal team and the counsel to your board to answer that. That's beyond my scope.
What are the consequences for a failure to register?
Well, eventually, when a building does not register, we have a tenant protection unit that will come out and enforce regulations.
And has the tenant protection unit begun enforcing the regulation that approximately half of buildings in Kingston have not submitted initial regulations or registrations? Sorry.
I don't believe so, but you again check. A good idea is to check with the council to the board.
What is DHCR doing to increase compliance with the law in terms of building registrations?
The HR is continuously contacting the owners that we received from, the information that we received from the city of Kingston, and whether it's targeting and calling them or sending them letters or certified mail, reminding them those that we have their email addresses. We also send email addresses. Emails to that address. We practically, I would say, every week, we try to target those who have not registered initial registration, and not only that, those who have registered, we continue to work with them to make sure that they register on a yearly basis.
How effective has that outreach been? Have you seen an increase in submissions of initial registrations as a product of that work?
It's been very slow.
Onto another line of questions. How many challenges were filed to initial registrations?
That I do not have. That information is not within my scope.
Okay. Can you get that information and prepare it for this board?
Sure, give me a second. If I could ask for a favor, I'm sure you will ask a few more questions. if it would be possible for you to put together an email, I will, the council to the board will provide you with my email address. And that way you can CC the entire membership of the board. And we will be able to answer all of you at the same time. All your questions could be answered that way.
I will appreciate that. Michael.
Yeah, just a few follow-up questions. This less than half response rate of Kingston property owners, how does that compare to the other rent guidelines boards?
Well, you are a new to the ETPA regulations, so it's very hard to compare someone who's been on the ETPA for 40 plus years compared to someone who's just been a part of the ETPA for a year. So it wouldn't be a fair comparison. They also had their growing pains over the years. I wasn't there 43, 45 years ago, but I know from stories that I've heard. It's taken them time, but over a period of a number of years, a nice population, which generates a very nice data for you to be able to review, is achieved.
That sounds like a problem of enforcement, but just for the sake of the answer, though, what is the owner response rate in Rockland and Westchester?
The owner response rate, as far as, I'm sorry, because we're talking about now initial registration. Are you talking about the actual registrations, the annual registrations?
I'm talking about the annual. Sorry, I thought
No problem.
I didn't realize we were just talking about the initial because I have
No, I'm
separate
sorry,
questions.
just because I'm sorry that I don't know all your names yet, but just the gentleman before you just was mentioning the 30 buildings submitted. So I was on that particular line. The response, the registration is, the annual registration is about, I would say, I have to check, but it's about 85 to 90%.
Okay. So back to the initial apartment registrations. What? Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind. My question was answered. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another question about enforcement. I imagine that there are a variety of overcharge complaints that are sitting in DHCR's offices in Long Island City. One set of those complaints, I think, will likely involve complaints that an owner failed to offer a lease that included this board's November 2022 adjustment applied to the previous rent. Those complaints, we all know, should not be processed because that guideline has been vacated pending appeal. And so I presume that those overcharge complaints are not being processed. Am I correct?
That question I would deal to, I believe April is there and she would be able, April or
Can you
Woody
come to
would
the
be able
table?
to provide you a little bit more information regarding that particular question.
You wanted red, I want green. You're correct. Approximately, there's 50 overcharge / fair market rent appeal filings currently waiting for the litigation to be resolved.
Thank you, April. I imagine that there's a subset of those overcharge complaints that are cases where leases that are offered to tenants include a rental rate greater than that of the unit's initial regulated rent. Those increases are a violation of the statutory requirements that rents not be increased between the effective date of the municipalities opting in to ETPA until there's a guideline set by the Guidelines Board in force. There is not a guideline set by the Guidelines Board in force. So it seems to me like the law does require does like that part of the law is still in effect, right? So has DHCR identified where there are overcharge complaints that still need to be processed even though pending litigation?
The case as of 2 days ago when I inquired, all of the cases that are currently pending as overcharges are actually fair market rent appeals, and they'll be processed once the litigation has ended.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? I said currently there's about 50 overcharge cases pending. They're being processed as fair market rent appeals, and they will be held until the litigation has been completed.
As a kind of as a tangent to that question, uh, my understanding is right now, any rent change since August 1st of 2022 is not allowed, right? It's for these units?
Correct.
Yeah, so what is DHCR doing in a case, like what is the interim recourse until the litigation is settled? Like, is anything happening to any of those complaints, or are they all waiting for the litigation to be settled?
They're waiting for the litigation.
Okay.
Your guideline was vacated, so currently, nobody's allowed to charge anything but zero.
Correct.
Okay.
And in instances where an owner has charged a rent higher than the initial regulated rent, is ORA processing overcharge complaints?
If there was one, I suspect that they would be, but I haven't.
Okay.
The last I heard, they were all fair market rent appeals. Remember, the tenants have to file a complaint.
Yep.
Nobody's coming out knocking on the door asking if you got charged more than that. Like, as an aside to that, as of last week, not any tenants in Kingston have filed a services complaint. I mean, I know a diminution of services complaint. You know, the last time we were here, a lot of people testified to how bad their apartments are, and I got that, but nobody has followed through and actually filed services complaints. Noah, did you have other questions that you had to go back to?
I have so many questions. I'm gonna take Guy up on emailing questions, but I do have one question that I want to ask here, which is usually rent guidelines boards get a series of reports that include income and expenses for buildings and a series of more detailed reports. I've looked at the ORA's website and have seen those reports for Westchester, for Rockland County, and the Kingston report, the Kingston data does not include the fairly bog standard income and expense reports among other things. Why is that?
The population that we received, which was about 6 surveys, and one of them which did not even include heat and hot water, and some of the data from the owners was not comparable to actually create such a data that you're speaking of. It would actually, it didn't give me as an economist any picture of what's happening there, let alone anyone who would look at such data. Providing you with such data, hopefully we can get more through your help, through the city's help, and hopefully more registration and more people, supplying information to the survey. And once they do supply information to the survey, and we get to a certain percentage, which would be a nice would be about 35% of the ETPA that's in the city of Kingston. We can generate these tabulations that you speak of. That's correct.
So fewer than 10% of the property owners have filed the annual income and expense survey?
What I would consider complete, with a lot of data that's a bit off, especially with income and expense information, I would say only 5 of them would actually be readable, not tabulatable. But
So what's that? Less than 10%, 5%?
well, if you're talking about if you're talking about out of the 30 that have registered, or out of the 62, let's say
I'm
that didn't,
talking total.
out of the total, so you have about yeah, you have about 7%, maybe 6%.
And is there any penalty for not filing it accurately or not filing it at all?
No, there is no penalty.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question for the chair. I understand that you are going to have an email exchange with this gentleman. How do we, I forgot your name. I'm sorry, sir.
It's okay, not a problem. I'm sorry, I don't know all your names. Over time, I'm sure
I'm
I will
Arlene.
learn.
How do you do?
Hi, Eileen.
I understand you're
My
going
name
to
is
have
actually very simple. My name is Guy, like a guy. And my last name is Alba, ALBA, and I'm the assistant commissioner.
I understand you're going to have an email exchange. How do we get that email exchange to the public?
So the chair, usually the way we work it out with other boards is the chair would present whatever number of questions that you all gather together, and present it to the legal team or the council to the board, or directly to me, as long as it's also CC'd to the council of the board and everyone else on the board. That way, everyone sees what is being asked, and also everyone sees what's being answered.
How do we get that to the public?
The
The answers to the public?
Okay, the answers that I provide will go to you, the board, which is my duty is to provide you with that information. How you disseminate it to the public, that would be up to you and your legal counsel.
An answer, Chair, for how the public will get this information?
I think we will share it the way that we have shared other information, which is by sending an email to the official email of the board, and those emails get consolidated into a very long PDF and posted on the DHCR's website. And thank you, Arlene. I appreciate that. Other questions? Yeah, Carol.
I hesitate. I hesitate because it's hard for me to understand. First, it's illegal for the landlords not to register their apartments. It is the central point of the lawsuit, right? That was propagated by the landlords against the city, that they were not included in it. And however, they continue not to be answering the any of the questionnaires, and it is against the law, yet there's no penalty against it. That's what I do understand, right? And so how is it that tenants have any recourse? It's only through DHCR filings, is that correct? And with landlord lawsuits, they just don't have to do anything because there's no penalty. Is that correct?
I'll defer to April on that question.
All right,
To Woody.
let's talk about this. There are a few things that are happening in Kingston. Half of the buildings we know have registered. Got it? We know that 50 complaints have come in for overcharges / fair market rent appeals, which could deal with a variety of different things, including lease violations. I got a lease, they changed the terms and conditions of my lease. My rent, I'm being gouged. Shouldn't be happening. Got it. We know litigation has told us we can't move. We can't process those cases. That's a fact. Can't do anything. 2 separate cases are moving. The RGB case, which deals with the vacate order on your rent guideline board, what you all established, and then the case regarding the vacancy study, on whether that in fact is intact and proper. Now, what's now got to happen is the tenants got to say to themselves, okay, What am I going to file? Do I file? Or they can go to a court of competent jurisdiction right here in Kingston and file a complaint or file a case against their owner themselves. Now, regarding the initial registrations, as Guy mentioned already, there's a tenant protection unit, and there are other recourses that are available that are being explored, because right now, if an owner does not comply, and we're going to give them a short window, there's going to be a problem. That could be frozen rents. That could be them being taken to a hearing, an administrative hearing, which could cause fines, but that does not give the tenant relief. We're trying to find a way to give tenants the relief that they need and desire. Because I get it. We all understand, but litigation is litigation. I can't process a case when I don't know what I'm going to get, what my end product is going to be. Got it? Yes, Mike.
So I don't know if this is a question for you or a question for Guy. So of the 50% of properties that have registered through initial apartment registration, what percentage of the 1,200 or so units does that actually cover?
I'd have to see what those numbers are. But here's the other thing. There's another bucket of owners who I'll say partially have complied, between 4 and 7, where they basically are saying, we are not part of ETPA based on the fact that they've done substantial rehab. We do know that at least a couple of buildings are actually vacant, that the owner's gotten various permits from the city of Kingston to rehab the building. There's no one in it, but we can't process those cases. We do know that one building, relatively larger building, had a regulatory agreement with the state of New York. They're out. So those things are also stymieing how we provide services, whether it's to the owner or to the tenant.
Thank you.
Hold on. April's got something to say.
Your 1,200 number is also moving because in addition to the 4 to 7 buildings that have allegedly done substantial rehab and may be out, there's at least one complex that has 12 buildings in it, 6 of which were built before 1974 and 6 of which were built after 1974. The 6 built after 1974 are not subject to ETPA. So your number's moving. It's a moving target at this point.
Which is appropriate, right? That's how the law
Correct.
works,
That's
right?
the way
Like the
you have to be-
process of
correct.
starting to
Yep.
implement ETPA involves identifying which buildings are covered and which buildings.
Right, you start with what the
exempt, right.
city of Kingston identified as those buildings that were 6 or more units built before 1974. And you move from there. And if the owners have done substantial rehabilitation, or the building doesn't have 6 or more units, or the buildings were built after 1974, they would be exempt from ETPA.
Or if they were
Or
vacant
if,
for a
or if
year
a complex
before.
went in and got an agreement with the city of Kingston, they may or may not become exempt from ETPA.
Thank you. Carol, I think that one of the questions that we have to face as a board as we deliberate next Wednesday is how we use this information that has been presented to us, right? We get to ask what have we learned from the research reports, and what do we do with that information? So I think that your question is exactly right, right? Like I share your frustrations that we don't have the information that buildings are legally required to provide, and we as a board get to navigate that together.
Mr. Chair, let me just say this too. It's beneficial for the owners to provide you with the information so you can see, in fact, what their operating costs are. We just don't have the ability to force them to comply. We send out the surveys. Guys talked about the different mechanisms they have in place. They call, they email, they send letters. the more information you have, the better off you'll be to make an informed decision on whatever the guideline board is.
We have a member of the public is here with us today who is the executive director of an association of property owners in the region. And I hope that this is a thing that he's taking back to his members.
Thank you.
So of those 6, so we've received 6 income and expense surveys. Of those, one of those sort of fell beyond what was normal or likely accurate, my words. So have you received any from property owners straight, an answer saying I'm not going to respond to this? It's just silence?
Correct.
Okay.
So the downside to this for us is that we will not have any information supporting property owner's case. It's basically the bottom line. We'll have to make a decision without that information. So it's that group of individuals is doing themselves a disservice by not providing us that information, is my understanding.
Do we have anything else to discuss, or are we ready to move towards finishing up for the night?
I have a question. What is the timeline for getting questions to Guy in email in order to get a response by next Wednesday, I think is when we're getting together, right?
Yeah, let's get questions to me by tomorrow at 5 p.m. and then I'll send them off tomorrow at 5 p.m., which should give Guy enough time. Guy and
Yes, that should
April
be
and our legal
fine.
counsel.
Yes, that should be fine.
And Guy, your PowerPoint, your slides are available somewhere?
Yes, again, that can also be provided when we return the email back to you with the presentation.
Thank you.
There's something that I always tell all the other boards. Besides the surveys, it's up to you also, all of you, when you present data to one another, to bring in data that you have researched and put together. You're not limited by the surveys to conduct research. Research should be done by each individual member and presented to the membership. That's as much as I will say, but I've said that for many, many years to all the other boards. I will say it to you now. I'm sure I'll be saying it again.
Thank you so much, Guy. I really appreciate it.
Will you be joining us on Wednesday, Assistant Commissioner, if we have any last-minute questions?
I'm not sure yet, but I'm sure we'll discuss April, Woody and I, as to what will be for next Wednesday. I believe it's the 21st.
That's correct. Thank you.
If there's nothing else to discuss, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I certainly make a motion to adjourn.
Carol moves to adjourn.
I'll second.
Junior seconds. Tara. Junior.
Aye.
Arlene.
Yes.
Noah, yes. Mia.
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
Carol.
Yes.
It is unanimous. It is 6:51, and we are finished here today. I will see all of you on Saturday. Thank you so much to everyone who made this happen.